Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Flourish. Today, I'm going to teach you something that I hope will be extremely useful for you in your relationships with your beloved people. Everyone pretty much agrees that having skills to communicate beautifully to one another is a basic element of any quality, good relationships. And there's been so much written about it. And experts agree that, of course, try not to be defensive, use active listening, stay calm, don't undermine, don't attack. If you need a break, take a break. There are certain sort of common elements that everybody who teaches communication uses. But after 4+ decades of working with couples and over 100,000 hours of face-to-face interaction, I've put together 10 additional skills that I think make the difference in whether the goals of wonderful communication actually happen. And I'm going to teach them to you today. Some of you may already use them, and hopefully some of you will learn something you've never learned or seen before. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Randi Gunther. I'm an author. I'm a marriage counselor. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm an avid blogger. As you can see from my office, I'm also a lover of elephants. Please, if you need to, get a pencil and paper because you might want to write some of these down, or you can re-listen to this podcast if you find it interesting and helpful. So let's start out with my 10, what I call crucial skills that are necessary for people to really have wonderful, productive, successful communication. Let's talk about the first one. I call it weaving. So many times I will hear from my patients that they have a terrible fight, and they wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, sweetheart, how are you? Would you like some coffee? It's as if the fight never occurred. So that the next time they try to communicate, they're not weaving in where they were the last time they were together. They sort of pretend it doesn't exist, or they forget the crucial things they may have agreed upon, and they just go on as if nothing happened. And of course, they're absolutely prone to have the same arguments again. So when there's been a fight the night before, a weaving example would be, wow, we really had a hard time last night. It's difficult for both of us. How are you doing this morning? I have some more stuff I'd like to talk to you about, but I want to make sure we're clear about where we were the last time we were together. When you weave beautifully from the past to the present, you also will begin to weave more in your combined dreams for the future. Okay, let's do the second one. The ebb and flow of great communication is evident in its rhythm. A person talks until they've talked it out, and the other person listens carefully until they make sure that that person has got out what they need to get out. Very often when a person first starts talking, they're not talking about what's really going on. They start off with something superficial and they need to get deeper, and to do that they need time, and they need somebody to give them that time. Well, that doesn't mean that a person can go on for an hour and overwhelm the other person. Sometimes in my past work with people, I said, take a sacred item and pass it back and forth, and who's ever holding it gets to speak. But if one person becomes overwhelmed, you need to say, I can't take any more right now because I won't be doing you service. I'll just be nodding my head and patronizing. And the other person gladly says, well, thank you for listening as much as you have. And then they take the next turn afterwards. It's not a riptide. It's like the ebb and flow of the ocean. It's just the rhythm is beautiful. And people can fall into that rhythm and begin to feel safer and safer with each other. Okay, this is really important. Number 3, you need to be alert to trauma triggers. When you're talking or when you're trying to talk something out or even having a mild disagreement, if you remind your partner of someone from their past who has inflicted trauma or pain upon them, that person is likely to start shouting, to get very nervous, to not maintain eye contact, to want to leave the room. Clearly, they're not with you anymore. They're somewhere else. You have to stop whatever you're talking about and attend to the trauma trigger that is emerging. Otherwise, what you want to talk about, well, that person can't listen. They're on output and they're cornered. So watch for trauma triggers both in yourself and in the person you're talking to. Okay, let's talk about number 4, proximity, presence. You can't solve something if 2 people are 30 feet away from each other or texting or turning their backs to one another. You have to sit down within 3 feet. Hopefully you would be even able to hold hands. You have to put all other distractions away, like cell phones. And you have to really look into each other's eyes. When you want to share something, the closer you are to that proximity and the more you are present, the more likely you will stay connected in the process of communicating. Okay, next, really important, defining terms. People can be talking to one another and their communication is going relatively well, but somebody uses a word that has a very different meaning to them or phrase than it does to the person you're talking to. One example that I had in my office many years ago was a young man, a young lawyer from New York, who grew up in an impoverished home and endured severe beatings. The person he was going to marry grew up beloved with wonderful parents, very, very much bubbled. And we were all talking. And she said to him, "You are being so brutal." And he began, as I told you when you alert trauma comes to the surface, he said to her, "I am not brutal. I have never been brutal. How dare you call me that word?" I stopped the conversation and said to him, what does brutal mean to you? How do you define that word? He said, it's having a kick in the teeth every single day of your life. It's being put down. It's being in an environment where you have enough to eat. And he began to get very understandably worked up. And I said to her, how do you define the word brutal? She said, well, he just says anything that comes to his mind. He's very blunt. He just challenges me all the time. And I said, oh, blunt. And I said to him, are you blunt? He said, yes, I really am. And we could move on. But just the definition of a word can throw communication completely goes haywire. And people have to stop and say, what did you mean? How do you define that word or that phrase? Where's it coming from? What does it mean to you? Okay, let's go on. Watching for verbal cues. God, I have written so extensively on this. In all countries, in all cultures, the communication of emotion, not necessarily technical information, but emotion, is over 90% non-verbal. Facial expressions, body language, voice intonation, proximity, rhythm, all of those are over 90%. So you can say to a child, well, of course I love you. What does that child hear? I'm burdened by you. Or you can say to a kid, oh my God, you drive me so crazy. I have no idea what I'm going to do with you. You're impossible. And with that tone of voice and that facial expression is compassion and love. So one has to understand that if you are responding 90% to nonverbal cues, that better be part of the communication that you express between the two of you. Okay, let's go on. Talking to somebody, not at somebody. That can be referenced back when we talked about trauma triggers. When all of a sudden a person's talking to somebody who's not in the room anymore, they're talking to somebody from the past, and all of a sudden the person feels like they're being lectured or talked down to, or in some ways patronized, because you've lost that connection. You're no longer looking into each other's eyes. You're no longer communicating only to each other. You're talking about yourself somewhere else. You're talking about other people that you're quoting that might have more influence with your partner than you think you do, but you're not talking to them anymore because what you're saying is not relevant to what is important to them. Okay, let's go to the next one. So important. I call it attunement. You see people skating together. You see people marching together. You see people dancing together. You see people who anticipate and experience how they are being perceived by another person in the moment. So if you go to talk to somebody and you are not living within their experience of you, what is it like for that person to be on the other end of you right now? If you are not attuned to one another's experiences as you are talking and communicating, you will never be able to reach that pinnacle, that beautiful goal where people communicate effortlessly together. So being tuned in, and when you aren't tuned in anymore, it's like a bad composition in music. All of a sudden, nothing's sounding beautiful. The tone does not connect. So when you lose attunement, or when you haven't learned attunement, first of all, you need to master it. And second of all, you need to pay attention immediately when people get out of tune, because that becomes the subject in that moment to communicate about, not what you started communicating about. Okay, number 9, making a sacred place for the other person. People don't always agree. People have different opinions about different things. They even have different opinions about things that happen between them. But a person's reality is sacred. What a person believes, experiences, understands, and feels is sacred to them. And even though you may not agree, you may not see it the same way, you have to allow for their reality. One of the greatest challenges to any person in this world is when somebody challenges their reality and makes them feel crazy. So you can say, I don't see it the same way. You can say, I wish I understood more. I wish I could feel what you're feeling. But please don't ever say to another person, that's bull, whatever it is. You're not making any sense. I don't even know what you're talking about. You're crazy. Don't gaslight. Don't ever do that to another person. Don't try to make them give up their reality in order to please you or get along with you. It's the greatest insult to another person's core self. Okay, the last one, I think, is the easiest to accomplish and do, even though people don't do it. After an athletic team or in the military plays a game, they come downstairs, they replay the game. They don't say to each other, that was really stupid, or why did you do that? And that was dumb. They talk about how they could have done things better. What would have worked if I had done this? What would have worked? They debrief. They don't rehash. The reason for being up to the past is to talk to each other about how they could have done better, not talking to the other person about what they did wrong. So hopefully, if you can understand these 10 processes, if you can see the validity of them, if you can commit to learning them, I promise you, your communication will soar. You'll become one of the 10% of couples I see who love to talk to each other because they know that that is a safe haven for them to be authentically themselves. If you want to know more about this and how I work with people, you can buy my book, my ebook, from this site, and also my CPR, which is a sort of CPR to heal a broken relationship, I think also will help. But hopefully you've gained something from what I'm trying to share with you, and I'll see you again really soon.